the call to order is kind of Pyrrhic with this guy. So. This is so.
You think I'm different in my committees? No, that's not.
No. So I don't know, Suki, you want to live it up and do a roll?
All right. Alternate Director Green.
Present.
Director McCullough.
Present.
Director Bragman.
Here.
Interim Chairperson Sears.
Here.
Alternate Mr. Boctel.
Here.
And Mr. Theodoro.
Here.
Director.
All right, so here we are, the Wednesday, December 11th meeting of the Marin Telecommunications Agency. I understand that we're deferring recognition of Andy Berman, so we will refrain from talking about him when he's not here and wait until he is here.
I'd be willing to talk.
I'm sure you would. And, so let's go to item number C, Director comments. Anybody have anything? No? Okay. Item D, Executive Officers Report.
Yeah, I have a couple updates for everybody. One regarding the DAP. We did meet with the Media Center in November, and we're in the process of finalizing the updates based on that meeting. And then we're pretty much on hold until San Rafael has their mid-year budget review in February, and we hear the outcome of that and have our next meeting to know where we stand with regards to the funding for the franchise fees. The MTA financial audit is in progress, and we should have that at our next meeting. Election of officers for the MTA board will be done at our next meeting, and our next regular meeting will be in February 12th,
Okay.
2014. And if anyone has any questions about the elections, let me know.
We should start campaigning now.
Yeah.
Is there a sign limit?
Oh, depends what city you're in.
How about contributions? Most important.
Also wanted to let you know that I will be sending a letter out to the city managers with regards to where we stand on the DAP, and that we won't know what the funding requirements will be until the April timeframe, probably March. But give them a heads up so that as they're starting to do their budget planning for the 2014-15 budget year, they keep it in mind. Because the funding first year of the funding we anticipate will be that year. And then we received the third quarter franchise fees. Comcast was paid out. We had an issue with AT&T because they did a true up with some over-reporting of revenues that they claimed they did during the last 3 years. But we're now ready to pay those out to the cities, the MTA members. There are 2 or 3 cities that actually ended up with a negative amount for this quarter because you didn't have enough current franchise fee revenues to cover what the true-up was. And so those adjustments will be made in the subsequent quarter for those cities that had a negative amount. The total true-up for all of MTA for franchise fees was approximately $14,000.
Do we have a question on the true-up and how that process works? Do we have a way to confirm the true-up and sort of check the numbers that were done?
Yes. Well, I've tried to talk to AT&T and get some information regarding the true-up, and they had not provided it to me, but I did talk to someone who does audits for various local governments and franchises, and got some information from them that another city here in California did get some true-up information, so I will be pursuing that further.
Okay,
because
great.
I do try to audit everything every quarter, and in this case I could not get it from them, and that's why I held paying the fees for a bit to see if I could, but I think at this point we'll go ahead and pay the fees to the members, the franchise fees that we've received. And then if there's any adjustments, we can continue to work with
So
it.
AT&T is refusing to give you numbers that you've requested?
They have to date,
Mm-hmm.
but as I said, I now know that they have given them to others, and I will continue
So
to pursue
you'll
it.
talk to them about that, continue pushing? Great.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Good. Good.
I was glad to hear that someone else had gotten it, so I have to get through to the right people.
Okay.
Let's see, the CMCM annual report, we expect we'll see at our next board meeting in February. And that's all I have for comments, unless you have any questions of me.
Questions?
Where are we at as far as getting that fund over to the media center to equip the cities. That was something we agreed would be done
Yes.
at our last meeting.
Right. I'm pulling together the information, and I need to get it to Greg for him to be able to write the letter of agreement. And we should be able to get to that now. We've been working on the DAP.
Do we have an estimated time of arrival for that agreement? Because I know these cities have been waiting a long time.
Well, probably would be maybe the very first part of January, I would presume, just by the time when I received the information. As I get very close to the holidays, I will be on vacation the last week of the year, but we can get that done the first part of January.
Better change your reservations now. I mean, it seems like it's a pretty simple thing to do.
It is, yeah, but we just want to make sure we have the information we need to have, and then we can go forward. That should be straightforward. It's going to be a very short letter agreement.
Very good. Thank you.
What information do you need to have organized in order to do that?
Well, it's looking at what the terms and conditions should be in that letter. And initially, I was working, the cities had wanted to go with an outside provider to do the video recording. And recently they agreed, San Anselmo and Marshall said, no, we just changed our mind, we want the media center to do it, so that would kind of change the terms and conditions a bit. So we finally got that, and I need to get the stuff over to Greg so that he can write the letter of agreement.
And so part of the outcome of this in terms of San Anselmo is going to be starting video broadcasting of our meetings, right?
The equipment will be installed, and then San Anselmo said that they want to go with the media center to actually operate the equipment as they are here tonight.
Right, and that, I agree with that. That is, as I think it should be. When do you forecast it actually happening?
Well, as we said, the letter agreement in early January. I know the media center is ready to do it. They have to order the equipment as soon as they get the funding. They have some of the equipment, perhaps, but they need to order all of the equipment. So it would be, the beginning.
So it ought to be well underway by mid or to the end of January? Not in terms of the document part of it.
Yes.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I would expect the first week of January, and then it would just be a matter of sending a letter over to CMCM for their review, and
Right.
I don't expect that should take that long. We'll have a signed letter, so.
And just, sorry, Gordon.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that the agreement is just for the media center to equip the various jurisdictions. It's just for equipment. It's not really an operational agreement at this
Yes.
point. Right?
No.
Yes.
Right.
But
And
the
that's-
issue was the equipment to be included in
Okay.
the installations.
Okay. It's just, the Finance and Policy Subcommittee actually directed that to happen in April, so it's just, I think people are kind of chomping at the bit to get going. I know San Anselmo and they want to do it, so
Yeah.
anything you guys can do to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can expedite it, that'd be great. It's a new year. It's ready to be
Uh-huh.
videotaped and San Anselmo.
Hit it
that's for
running.
sure.
Uh-huh.
Hit it running?
I think so.
Yeah, well, that would be great if we could really move that forward and make it
Yeah.
happen,
Yes.
because I'm sure all three cities are really looking forward to it.
They are.
So,
I know for San Anselmo, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
It's been a ball that's been kind of bouncing around lonesome in the corner of the room, it seems like, for a while, so.
exactly. Welcome, Rupert.
Good evening. My apologies for being late.
No problem.
That's okay. There's a chair up there if you would like.
Any other questions or comments on the executive director's report? Seeing none, our next item is the consent calendar. We have two items, approving the MTA October 9, 2013 board meeting minutes and the MTA fiscal year 14 budget status report through December 5, 2013. Any questions or?
I just have one correction or
Okay.
comment on the minutes, on the, where it recites MTA's proposal to provide $666,000 from franchise fees.
What page you on?
Second page, first
Page
page.
2, first paragraph under F.
660?
Right. And my recollection was that MTA's proposal actually was for something like $750,000. So I just don't know if it's fair to characterize that as MTA's proposal. So maybe, I just don't recall that that number was MTA's number, and I think the record should reflect there was a difference between MTA,
Yeah.
hold on a
The
second.
the-
now.
the CMCM's proposal was 760,000,
Correct,
and MTA's proposal was 660,000.
okay.
So I will review these, I did read
Okay.
them, but I'll check to make sure
Yeah,
that
just
that's
if you would.
appropriately. Okay.
Did you, do you want to add in a sentence reflecting what CMCM's proposal was, so it's obvious that there was a distinction?
I would defer to the executive director. If you have a tape of the meeting where you could just clarify what the CMCM proposal was. I'm not sure if it was 750.
760, I do recall that, that was on their sheet
Was it
that they
typo?
had.
No, that was.
But I
this
don't
is
see in here
MTA's
that we
was
said what-
660.
No, you're right,
Yeah.
I misread it.
Yeah.
So whether it needs that addition, that addendum, these minutes will have the addendum, so
Yes.
that's
So you're
fine.
comfortable with it as is?
I am.
Are you okay with it?
I am.
It is on these minutes.
But the next time you want to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, these minutes will
Oh,
have
okay.
my comment, I'm sure.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's fine.
Any other comments or corrections on the minutes?
Can I make a tiny correction?
Sure.
Typo. Bottom page 3,
Uh-huh,
to this penultimate line,
yes.
it says the rest if us. It means that it should have been the rest of us.
Rupert, I have that circled on mine.
You guys are so good, and I try to be. I missed that one.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll make that correction.
Well, I keep all those.
Okay, have we achieved perfection now?
Well,
That's good.
We aspire.
We
don't expect, but we aspire. We have
All right, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you, all in favor?
Yes, I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining, okay, very good.
Would you like to say anything, Mr. Walker?
If I was to help you.
Okay. Next is public open time for items not on our agenda. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item G, which is an appointment of Andy Berman to serve on MTA's DAP negotiating team.
Yes.
Do you want to introduce this matter?
Sure. This is, as we all know, and Andy is no longer on the Mill Valley City Council, therefore he's no longer on the MTA. But he has been involved with the negotiations on the DAP for the last year and a half. And he said he would be willing to continue in the negotiations instead of changing the MTA board member at this point in time, since we're so close to the end. Legal counsel Greg said that it was okay for us to appoint someone from the community. And so that's the recommendation, is that we appoint Andy to continue through the end of the DAP negotiations.
Comments or questions? Anybody? I think it makes a lot of sense to have the continuity.
Who else is on the team?
Yep.
It's myself as executive officer and Greg Stefanisic as legal counsel.
So the three of you?
Three of us, yes.
Okay. Someone like to propose a motion?
I'll
approving
move the
that?
appointment of Andy Berman as the citizen participant. I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
That was easy.
Great.
All right, supers. Next item is a CMCN update.
Sure.
Michael?
I'll keep it short. I know everyone's trying to keep a short meeting. So just facility-wise, we actually had our carpets cleaned. Pretty extravagant expenditure, but it was almost,
I
we're on
wanna
our
ask you
5th
how long
year
it's been.
this time. So if you come, we're stainless now. We think we might even do it every year. We found this company that does it very cheap. So that was the good news. Bad news in November, we had 2 of our servers go down to do the playout for the channels. So, that's always rather chaotic. And, these are the scheduling servers that control the playout of the programming. So we actually were able to back up to another system, continue without a hitch, which is good. But this is what starts to happen when equipment ages. So, and they had to be overnighted to Minnesota, which was no cheap expense either. And then on the donation front, we actually picked up another business underwriter. Good Earth kicked in $5,000 for the media center for this year, so they're getting thank yous on air and on our website and on everything that we send out. And we'll be doing a push for individual donations. We've picked up about 2,000 in the last couple months. And I just got notice that one of our board members, Jim Garrity, is receiving the Martin Luther King Humanitarian Award from the Marin Community Foundation. And that passes money to the nonprofit of their choice. And he
Great.
very generously selected the media center.
That's great.
So that's good. And on the government education front, we've been training some folks at Marin Academy. We've always done that. They cover a lot of their student events, and we provide them. They're members, so we usually end up training a couple facilitators who work with the students, and then they start covering the events. And we've been doing the Hooked on Marin speaker series, and that's been going really well. That's a project we're doing with the comm program at Drake, and the kids are covering this speaker series. They've been doing a really nice job, actually. And part of the Hooked on Marin series, we've been working with the Tamalpais Continuing Ed program, and we're actually wrote up some non-member courses which we're going to offer in that catalog as a way of bringing more people into the media center. So these will be non-members. They'll be taking courses that doesn't entitle them to use the equipment. They're just coming there for instruction. So we're trying to expand some of our course offerings beyond what we currently offer members. So hopefully that'll go well. We'll see what the response is. And we've been working on a sort of a team-based model of for collaboration that we're going to start working with nonprofits on, and that was something that we tried out with a local commercial firm, and it went really well. So we're trying to build some training programs like that. Some other things, I spoke to DFA Marin last month and was at the Union for Democratic Communications conference where I spoke on a panel. And programming-wise, we did a couple events out at the Civic Center for the 50th anniversary. And we've been running a lot of new emergency preparedness videos, so if you're watching the government channel, you'll see those. Some of those are coming out of San Diego and LA. They're actually really nice. Emergency preparedness videos are finally becoming watchable, so check them out. We're hoping that will attract some interest by some Marin first responders to come work with us. And we've done some work with the San Rafael Canine Patrol. We did some fundraising videos for them. So I'm actually trying to get them to bring the dogs in for a fundraising spot. So we'll see if that happens. I'm trying to get them to let me wear the bite suit.
Have you talked to the County of Marin's Office of Emergency Services about working together?
We will. Yeah, I probably sent them,
A million emails.
some notes years ago.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes. On the city stuff that Ford raised, we're eager to get started on that. So we've just been waiting for the funds so we can order the equipment. We just don't have liquid cash to do that at this point.
What kind of turnaround, Michael, is it when you place the order?
A couple of weeks to get all the equipment. I already have all the order lists. It's the same installs we've done everywhere.
So you just get it out and wait to get the equipment, and then you can get going?
Yeah, and we usually, depending on the chamber, and the complexity of the install, it might be anywhere from 120 to 140 hours of our staff time. There's usually 2 or 3 of us running around on ladders. We usually get it done in a week or 2, and then we do some testing before we go live.
Sounds like a pretty big job.
It's a little bit of coordination, but we'll probably do all these 3 cities at once. So I don't anticipate any problems. Larkspur's already been in touch with me, the city manager and the public works, about power requirements, so they're already working out details. And we'd met with Debbie in San Anselmo way back in March. A lot of this hinged on the DAP getting approved, which at that point I thought was a couple of weeks away.
Yeah.
So the sooner all this stuff wraps up, the better, I think, for everyone involved, and we're eager. I've had staff who've trained to do these operations that have come and gone, because it's been so long. So we'll have to retrain some folks. And then just a few things just on the policy front. Tom Wheeler was sworn in as the chairman of the FCC, and fortunately for us, he appointed one of his senior staff, Gigi Sohn, who came from Public Knowledge, and prior to that she was at Media Access Project. Really good public interest advocate, for our team. So it's really good to see someone get a good position on the FCC. There was a lot of second thoughts about Wheeler taking over as the chairman. This is perhaps a good sign, so hopefully good things will come of it. And that's important because in the House, 2 of the Republican House members announced that they want to start rewriting the Communications Act. And one of the Congress people is Fred Upton from Utah, who doesn't have a really good track record with things like public access and public education, governmental TV. He was a big part of the Coke bill that they tried to pass in 2006. That was an AT&T bill that actually passed the House. Upton championed it through the House, and it got shot down in the Senate, primarily because of AT&T's net neutrality stance, and Senator Stevens was completely baffled by the whole concept of the internet. He wasn't a very good salesperson. But we got really lucky on that one. That would have been like DFCA at the national level, but it was even worse at that point. So that's not real good news. I don't think in this Congress anything big can happen, so that's a good thing. So that's pretty much it. The CAP Act was actually introduced to the Senate. Tammy Baldwin and Markey reintroduced it. So this is a bill that would impact on us. The CAP Act seeks to remove the capital restrictions that applies under many of these state franchises, like DFCA. Again, these state franchises were passed by AT&T in about 20 states, and they altered the relationship between operating and capital by referencing some rather poorly defined language in the Cable Act. So the CAP Act would correct that. It would also raise the minimum peg fee to 2% from 1%. So for us, that would be very good. It means Comcast would have to pay what they're supposed to right now. If it passed tomorrow, they would owe us 1%. And it does a few other things. It takes AT&T to task for treating the public education governmental channels as web streams rather than true TV channels. So there's a few other corrections like that. So that's a bill that we really need to get behind. I mean, we'll be getting in touch with our federal and state reps to try and get them to co-sign it. Maybe Jared can get involved in introducing it into the House. I think another strategy was to try and get this bill attached to an appropriations bill, which is the congressional way of sneaking things through. So that may happen as well.
Back on the emergency preparedness videos for a moment, I don't know what you have in mind and what you're planning to do with those videos, but if you're sort of going a human interest angle, there's a great community in Tam Valley called Autumn Lane that, working together with Southern Marin Fire, had a very productive work day to reduce wildfire hazard in their neighborhood. And it's a great story, and that might be something that could be a good topic for a video, depending on what you're planning to do.
Yeah, no, I'm always interested in things like that. We were out in Belvedere. Tom Cromwell, heads up the.
And Tom has a fantastic.
Yeah, Damien and I went out and spent a day
Yeah.
shooting out there. He brought all the emergency preparedness teams together.
Super.
And it wasn't very well attended by the public, unfortunately. And the whole purpose of the event was to try and solicit volunteers and coordinators.
Right.
But the Tiburon Belvedere Peninsula has a lot of potential serious risks. And I think Tom's addressing it really well, but there just isn't a huge awareness of it. So we're working with, we're going to bring him into the studio. He has this wonderful PowerPoint.
Great.
That he didn't do it justice that day in the auditorium, so we're going to bring him in the studio, I think.
Well, I bet that's 50
did a
new
good job.
truck. You're going to want to get that in there.
We got all the trucks, and yeah, Yeah, but I think those stories are really good. The things that we're picking up from LA and San Diego, they're doing anything from telenovelas for earthquake preparedness to, almost like little science shows. So they're really entertaining programs. I actually gave a copy to the clerks out there that do your meetings because they've totally run out of things to play in between recesses.
Oh.
And since K Productions stopped producing,
Right.
they didn't have any content. We used to have them looped at. So now they're looping these emergency preparedness videos.
Oh, that's good. That's great. Any other questions, comments for Michael? Any? No? Great. Super. All right. Thank you, Michael. All right. So our next item is agenda item I, support Marin's participation in broadband consortium. Barbara, do you want to tee this up?
Sure. The recommended action here is to approve support of Marin County's participation in a North Bay North Coast Broadband Consortium. And this will help facilitate Marin's ability to plan for and seek opportunities for partnerships and funding to be able to expand broadband in unserved and underserved areas throughout Marin. And the majority of these are in the West Marin area. So there is a program at the California CPUC, it's called the California Advanced Services Fund. And they've changed the program over the years. I had originally talked to them back around the time of the federal stimulus funding. And at that time, because of the way the mapping was, and they didn't show West Marin as being unserved or underserved, and they wouldn't change the maps. There was a lot of controversy over that. So now it's great that they have changed the program and there's an opportunity for us to participate. They have established a consortia account which provides funds to various counties that may partner together, make application to the CPUC to be established as a consortia, and then the PUC would pay that consortia some funds to do planning and some broadband adoption efforts. So Marin has had the opportunity, San Francisco wanted us to join with them, and then also we were looking at an opportunity with Napa, Sonoma County, and Mendocino County. And Steve Kinsey, Supervisor Kinsey, has been working on this with a small team here in Marin that included myself and Barbara Layton from the county IT department, and someone from the county administrator's office, as well as people from the public works department. And we decided that the best thing to do would be for us to partner with Napa, Sonoma, and Mendocino, since our counties are more similar with regards to our needs. And also Marin County is kind of the gateway to those counties, so to the extent that we could be sort of a center to be able to have some of the broadband here and feed from those other counties down through us to other counties, there would be benefit. So what the proposal here is for us to participate in that North Bay, North Coast Consortia with the other 3 counties, to make an application to the CPUC, and they've opened up some new funding in October for that, and we have to make the application by January 17th, so there's a lot of work to be done in a very short period of time. So I'm bringing this to the board. One of the things that can really help in the application is to have various entities and agencies within Marin County indicate their support for the consortia and the work that it will be doing. And since Marin Telecommunications, our charter is both, with cable as well as telecommunications in general, broadband more specifically, and broadband adoption, I felt that this fit within our charter for us to support it. There's no direct funding requirement from MTA. However, I would be involved in helping gather some of the information on what the situation is in Marin, and providing input for a Marin-specific work plan that would be included with the proposal that we would do to the CPUC.
So when I was speaking with Steve Kinsey about this yesterday, Barbara, he suggested, although there's an obvious need in West Marin, and I know that's been probably a focus of conversation, there was also the possibility through this program to get expanded service in the canal in Marin City.
Yes.
So that's one thing I was going to suggest. I think it would be great to make a minor revision to the letter so that we mention that as well.
Okay.
Perhaps in that first bullet point where it currently says the extensive broadband underserved and unserved areas within the county concentrated in rural West Marin. Maybe we could revise that to say unserved areas within the county, especially in rural West Marin, the canal, and Marin City.
Okay. Yes, because we have been talking about that. We've also talked about adoption, particularly in those areas. So I'll make that change. And Peter Pratt is here in the audience, and he's been one of the ones that's been working extensively with Steve Kinsey and with the other counties, as well as with the state PUC with regards to this proposal. So I can take questions from you, and Peter also can help answer perhaps if you have questions
Peter,
about
anything you'd like to add to?
Thank you, Supervisor. Again, I think you're absolutely right, by the way. The problem coming through the numbers, and Barbara is right, broadband mapping is part of the controversy here. Ed Markey pushed for broadband mapping in the stimulus, pushed at the incumbents to allow us to have that data so we can get the data for places like West Marin and on the adoption side, as you mentioned, the Canal District, Hamilton, Marin City. Just to throw a number out at you, of the 9 counties in the Central Bay area, rather surprisingly, Marin has the lowest rate of broadband deployment of all the 9 counties as a relative percentage of its housing stock and population. In absolute numbers, Sonoma has slightly more than Marin does. Sonoma is twice the population base. So when you add together the federal and state certified, unserved, and underserved, you multiply that household count, which is about 3,300 households, have substandard broadband in Marin County. Most of them, but not all of them, are centralized in Steve Kinsey's West Marin district. You put against that a housing population figure of about 2.3 per household. We're talking almost 8,000 of our fellow citizens in Marin County, 40 minutes away from one of the most information-intense areas on the planet, obviously, are underserved by federal definition. Now, of course, pushback would say, incumbents might say, well, you have a national seashore. You have a low-growth protected area. Yes, but we don't count tule elk and cows. We count occupied households under federal law. And those occupied households are not served. We know where they are. They run basically along the Route 1 corridor. As Barbara says, when Steve kind of bent my arm on this, and I would warn you, if he does that and asks you, what can you do for his district, maybe steer him to the bar and have another drink. But seriously, it's something that should be done. The way to access the state funds is with this planning grant. All of us in the public sector have seen this, whether it's HUD, whether it's emergency services, whether it's transportation money. You've got to say, here's the plan, and then go for the bricks and mortar shovel in the ground. The brass ring here at the end of this is taking carriers and service providers, and under California law, only carriers and service providers can get this money. You can think of those folks out in West Marin today, taking them to the CPUC and say, here's the county endorsed plan, here's a public-private partnership with these providers. Now we are applying with them on their behalf for $10, $20, $15 million, whatever it is, to upgrade their facilities. Last point, if I could very briefly. What Steve Kinsey has been able to do, I think most importantly, by the way, I ran the state of Massachusetts broadband program, which under Governor Deval Patrick and his friend the President's stimulus spending, we have successfully essentially brought fiber to every incorporated town in western Massachusetts that was nearly completely unserved a decade ago. That and our colleagues in places like Maine, upstate New York, Vermont, Missouri, are triumphs, are absolute triumphs in the business of our country and people that do what I do in bringing fiber to unserved areas. I said to Steve, and Steve immediately reached out to Barbara and some key department heads at the Civic Center. The key to this is not just federal or state money, although we have to go after that. We have to partner with a consortia to be able to go up to that window to get that money. But the other key is breaking down the silos within county government. For instance, right-of-way reform. For instance, putting a conduit in the ground the next time a county road project is in West Marin. Conduit owned by the taxpayers at literally cents per foot. A carrier can much more easily come along, partnering with carriers. Today we have the first competitive fiber optic facilities north of the Golden Gate, west of 101, out to Nicasio, thanks to Skywalker Ranch. It runs through Ford and my town, Barberstown and San Anselmo. It comes out of San Rafael. It comes into a data center in San Rafael. If we aggregate public traffic and say to a carrier, here's a faster way to get through a right-of-way, will you take public funding to get there? Will you take our money for our civilian or public safety communications for a fixed contract time, build out to Point Reyes, build to Tamales? Again, breaking down the silos. I won't take your time, but the key to this consortia is a work plan that works for Marin. We want to be good neighbors, but quite frankly, you know, our problems are much easier to solve than Mendocino or Sonoma. And we want to partner with them because we share rights of way. The smart right of way is a wonderful opportunity. But at the end of the day, as Steve Kinsey has directed us, clearly he would for his district, the mission is in West Marin and in those adoption areas that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And Hamilton also should be included, right? So we can add reference to the canal, Marin City and Hamilton. Yes?
I don't mean to be elementary about this because this is my first exposure to this, but in English, what are you talking about? I mean, are we talking, are we
We're talking,
Are we talking about?
Alternates are hell.
Are we talking about simply having wires or the equivalent wires out on the street that would eventually be connected to houses? Are we talking about connecting it to the houses? Are we talking about providing service to people in houses? Where are we? I know silos, but where are we? What are we talking?
Whatever the provider comes forward to want to do.
But you're asking for money to do something.
Oh,
yeah.
planning.
This initial phase is
Yeah.
to get money to do planning, to identify where we need to do things and what the possible solutions would be. In parts of Marin, we don't have, there is not high-speed capacity for internet access like other areas.
So the
in
wires
central
aren't there.
Right, right.
So this is the fundamental of what you're talking about is to update, the first step, I guess, would be to update those wires to something that's not wire, but okay.
The
So
first
the-
step is to figure out what needs to be updated and what the options are for doing it.
Okay, that's what,
Right,
that's what this is,
that's
okay.
what this
That's
money
what this
is for.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
exactly.
I just,
Yeah, no.
thank you.
Got it really grounded.
Well, I mean, look, come on. I mean, I go home, I dial the phone, I put my, the computer in there and I go on the internet, it's fine.
It's really
Right.
easy.
Yeah, I can
And
download.
other people want that too.
I downloaded a song in like 3 hours.
Yes. And some other people in Marin don't have that opportunity, so this is about trying to figure out how that opportunity might be
Okay,
available.
okay, so that's what you don't know who doesn't have that service now.
We know general areas, and so what this plan would be to look at how those could possibly be served,
Okay,
what it would take to be able to do that.
okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, just to clarify about what you mean using the term plan. You're not talking about departments within jurisdictions. You're talking about an overall, more normal use of the word plan in terms of figuring out what the scope of your problem is what the components of it are and how you're gonna go about addressing the delivery of fiber.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
I spend a lot of time with these two on the Marin Energy Authority Board, and now you're getting a sense of how those board meetings go. And it's always, it's good. It makes it, all of us able to understand everything.
Those are wires too.
And
Yeah.
they are, exactly.
And for Director Wachtel, whenever somebody first comes on the MTA board, I usually sit down with them for an hour to 2 hours and go through a lot of this
Okay.
stuff, and then
And
some
then it takes about
refresher
another year to
courses.
get
Right.
slightly more clear.
So,
Not to know all the acronyms.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's way more than.
So, but I'm
a year.
Oh my
thankful
gosh, yeah.
that you asked the question so that you,
Absolutely.
so we can back up a little bit. And
Yeah, if I could, to extend Ken's desire for greater simplicity here. You've addressed one half of the equation when you talk about extending the infrastructure or planning to extend the infrastructure, but what about areas like the canal, Marin City, and Hamilton, where the infrastructure may be in place or largely in place, but the adoption is low, presumably because of income levels or desire, demand, education, et cetera. The classic digital divide, how does this effort and the planning address that problem? And really would like to get a very short answer, simple answer, as opposed to a long sort of policy-laden answer.
right. A part of this program, there's two parts to it. One is infrastructure, the other is adoption. So looking at what we may need to do or could be possible with regards to adoption and what are the roadblocks, whether it's financing for people to be able to purchase it and what programs are available for that. Is it the training and what types of nonprofits or entities in our community are doing that or could be funded to be able to do that. So it's looking both at getting the infrastructure, the wires in place, and also looking at the adoption and what is causing the adoption rates to be low. So it's both aspects.
Any other questions?
Just
or
one
comments?
question
Yeah.
for Peter. I know part of the infrastructure is the line that was put out to Skywalker, which runs down Drake through Fairfax. Is there going to be some backflow possibilities for us or for the Ross Valley communities to extend that fiber to some of our housing opportunity sites?
I think, Larry, any major end user could tap into that tomorrow. All it takes is a lot of money and the demand, like Skywalker has tremendous demand, as you know. But again, going forward, using the demand of, say, the county and the municipalities together, could we jawbone a carrier? That's the whole public-private partnership shtick, I think. And that would be the way to do it. I mean, no one approached that carrier and said, well, maybe we could light up Wi-Fi in Fairfax, or, you know, here's some commercial buildings in downtown San Anselmo. So it's once you bring everyone to the table and say, look at all this demand here, what else can you do for us for this contract from the public sector? You can start to get some action.
And to add to that, we have our Midas network here in Marin, which is a lease network from AT&T that goes to all of our public safety, towns, public works, fire, police, all of that. That contract is up in 3 years. So one of the things, Barbara Layton from the county IT department and I work on this, and we've started talking about planning and saying, you know, how could we take that, as we did with AT&T, took all of that demand and we're able to get some good prices for our current network, and how can we take all of that demand and maybe leverage that into another solution that may be even more cost effective. So that's another little
Maybe
part
some
a little bit.
competition there for Midas
Yeah.
or for the provider.
Right.
Great.
So the proposal that we're about to approve doesn't relate to funding, it relates to presumably your time. How much time is this
Some time.
going to take?
It'll be somewhat, you know, maybe take about 30% of my time between now and mid-January as we try to put together this plan. And then after that, it'll be determined, you know, then we'll be in a cycle of waiting for approval and then seeing what the next steps
But
are.
the good news is there are a number of people working on putting
Yes.
putting the proposal together, so it's not all on your shoulders, so that's
No,
help.
yes,
Yeah.
there is someone who is pulling it together for all four counties.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just our Marin people that would be working on Marin County. And because I've done in like the Google proposal, done a lot of research for that and done research for the stimulus funding, and I kind of know where some of the resources are and what plans are going and where we have some of the deficits and that kind of thing. So that would be my part of the input.
Another question? The one other change that I would suggest for the letter, I appreciate the promotion to chair, but it's not entirely accurate. I'd be happy to sign the letter, but I think we should come up with another title. If you need me to sign it right away, we could do interim or queen for a day.
Queen for, I like queen for a day.
Do you have a little pillow?
I go for queen for a
Chair
day.
tonight, and that's
Chair
when we're
probably is
acting on it,
better.
but.
Commandante.
Yeah.
All right.
Come up with something appropriate. All right, so any other conversations, discussions, questions? I'd
No,
entertain a motion.
I would read it, and I just want to thank Peter for really finding the embers in the ashes on this, because our quest for wire has been going on since 2009. So this is a big step for us, a good thing for the county.
If I could just say also, Madam Chairman, a rising tide does lift all boats. This can't happen without more fiber going into the 101 corridor. This can't happen without our largest employers like Fireman's Fund, which Barbara can tell you we've talked about at the Civic Center, also getting better competitive access to cheaper fiber. Bring competition in, everybody gains.
Yeah, good point.
Right.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so you made a motion?
And
Do you have
I'll
a
second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks very much. And the last item on our agenda, the FCC.
These are shorter than MTA meetings.
Hey, they are shorter. It's a good thing. I know, we should come here more often. Is FCC new wireless citing notice of proposed rulemaking and considering funding to file comments.
This is a late-breaking thing. Late last week, the FCC actually published this notice of proposed rulemaking in the Federal Register. And when they do that, then it goes out to the public. They establish a response date for comments to go into the FCC and a second response date for reply comments to go to the FCC. And I'll have Greg will describe in a lot more detail about what the notice for proposed rulemaking is, but it does have to do with wireless siting, and some of what they're proposing in here would have tremendous impact on local government and their authority or losing authority with regards to being able to regulate the wireless siting within our communities. And so that's why I wanted to bring it to the board. The MTA doesn't actually have the authority, the zoning authority for wireless siting, but I thought since this is a telecommunications board and all of our agencies have the authority with regards to zoning, that this may be one way that we as a team could support filing some comments, whereas each individual city likely will not be able to because it is very complex. So I have been approached by one of the firms that does a lot of work in this area with a proposal, and then I've also researched to date as much as I can about what some of the national organizations may be doing in this area. Because often NATOA, which is our sort of industry organization for MTA, will file comments. I've talked to NATOA on this, and like I said, this was just published mid last week, and so the discussions are very preliminary. But it appears that there will not be filing detailed comments on this. They do partner at times with like the National League of Cities, National Association of Counties, the U.S. Council of Mayors, sometimes of the Association of Public Works, on doing filings, and they're in the process of talking to those other national organizations. But in talking to the law firm that came to us with a proposal for us to join a coalition of local governments, So far, they said that these other national organizations don't seem to have the funding to be able to file as detailed filings as would be beneficial in this instance. So BBK Law came to us with a proposal that they're putting together a coalition of local governments, that each entity could pay in some amount and have the benefit of all of that being put together to be able to develop the arguments, document them with expert comments, and that type of thing that we could all get benefit from in being able to file comments in this thing. It's very important, and Greg will go into more, but it's very important because the industry is very strong in that they want to remove as many, if not all, regulation with regards to them being able to place wireless facilities in site towers and antennas and those types of things. And so it's really important for the local governments to have a very strong participation in this to be able to offset that. Some of the cities that have already indicated an intention to be involved are some of the large cities like San Jose, Los Angeles, Boston, Massachusetts, Portland, Oregon, Montgomery County, Maryland. Those are some of the cities that, as I'm involved with NATOA, with all of my counterparts throughout the nation, those are some of the cities that get very involved in these types of, and the issues legal and regulatory associated with these types of sightings. So for us to participate in a coalition.
Can I ask you a question on that? The counties, the cities that you just mentioned were not included on the list of cities that are in the memo. So let's just take Portland, Oregon, for example. I mean, the list in the memo is San Jose, Los Angeles, Redwood City, et cetera. Oh no, I'm sorry, Portland isn't there. I'm just wondering if there might be an alternate way to develop our comments, but we can get into that discussion afterwards. So as far as you know, though, major cities are inclined to participate in this consortium and put in consolidated comments.
Yes, yes. Because, and I'll maybe just turn it over very quickly to Greg, because he can explain sort of the complexity of this and the reason. You know, at sometimes in the past for FCC, I've done some filings, or NATOA's done filings, but this one, because of the impact on local government authority, I thought that it was important to bring to the board for us to consider how we really want to participate in this.
Absolutely.
So the proposal is for us to pay up to $15,000, one with this BBK, or as other discussions go on, there may be a different opportunity that would either be less or more appropriate for this. And since we've only had a few days since it was published, I suggested that maybe we could get some authorization for some funding, and then Greg and I can look at the different opportunities and see what makes most sense for us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Greg so he can talk about the notice for proposed rulemaking and the details.
Yeah, I guess that's to start with a little backdrop on where cities had their regulatory power and what's at issue right now in terms of the rulemaking. And in the 1996 Telecommunications Act, there was a big fight at that time was what power should cities have to regulate the placement of wireless facilities within cities and counties. And ultimately that fight ended up with the zoning power being preserved in cities and counties, and with some limitations. The limitations were that the policies and regulations of local government cannot be discriminatory among different providers. They cannot place barriers to competition by providers, and also that any application for a zoning permit would have to be acted upon within a reasonable period of time. So that's went back to 1996, and over that whole course of time, sort of ongoing complaints by the telecommunications industry, wireless industry, that there had been excessive delays in the processing of zoning applications. And there became, then the FCC did issue what's called a declaratory ruling, placing some more stringent time limits on the processing of applications. The first then, and most recent substantive limitations placed on cities was a bill actually slipped into the Middle Class Tax Relief Act in 2012, which had nothing to do with telecommunications except for this one section, which was section 6409. And what that did was it said that if there are minor modifications to existing facilities, Then basically a city or county's power were limited to just a ministerial review of that application. It did not allow any type of discretionary review as you would have with design review or maybe a CUP process. And a lot of questions now under that particular section as to what the scope of it is and whether or not it applies to non-conforming structures, what is meant to be a minor modification. And there's been some advisory rulings given by the FCC in this area, but has still left a lot of dispute. So the notice of rulemaking is extremely long. It looks like extensive regulations in their own right. It goes on for a number of pages, outlining the number of questions that the FCC plans to look at. And the focus of the rulemaking is, number one, to what extent should the environmental review of facilities be expedited or reduced in scope. And the issue there would be whether or not to distinguish between and how you define smaller facilities versus larger facilities. And then there's a very extensive set of questions with respect to how Section 6409 is going to be interpreted with respect to what is a minor modification. And so those are the main issues at stake here. I do think that there's a question of, well, what's more effective, to have a number of different cities file different comments or have a more unified approach. And I think it's been more effective for cities to have a more unified approach in their comments, so you don't get into conflicting comments or point of views being expressed to the FCC in this rulemaking. I think probably the question for all of you tonight is, number one, what avenue would be appropriate, assuming that the MTA itself wants to be a name on comments being filed with the FCC. We have done this before on various items. One that actually I worked on was when we commented upon the question of whether or not internet services should be subject to franchise fee. And I think Larry will remember that one. That's when you were on the board a number of years ago. And but I think in this case it probably does make more sense again for a more unified approach. But it's a question of whether or not the board here would want to authorize any expenditure of monies in this area and to do this. I think, as Barbara mentioned, this has kind of been fast moving as to what the opportunities are to comment. And historically, NATOA has done extensive comments at no charge to cities. In some cases, other times they have had charges on members to contribute to the cost of preparing the comments. BBK, it's their Washington, D.C. office that would be preparing this, and actually that office has been doing telecommunications work and cable TV work as long as I can recall. So they have a great deal of expertise in this area. So they definitely are a suitable firm to be doing the comments in this particular case. And again, as Barbara mentioned, the MTA itself is not directly involved in the sense we don't regulate wireless facilities, but every member here, it's in your zoning power to, in fact, to do so, and you do so. I mean, every city does, in fact, regulate the placement of wireless facilities within your jurisdiction, and oftentimes they can be, as you know, very controversial when towers are placed and antennas are placed in sensitive areas. So that's the backdrop, and again, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, I'm going to kick it off and then I'll come to you. I think this is an important issue that it is in our interest in commenting on, but I do have some hesitations about joining a large group like this, and that was really sort of enhanced by the issue you brought up of what smaller versus larger facilities mean, and I'm not sure that any of our local jurisdictions would answer that question the same way San Jose, Los Angeles, Boston, Scarsdale, and Portland, Oregon would. So I have some concerns about whether this is a group that's really going to be forwarding comments that exactly fit our interests. So I would suggest that it could be in our interest to try to figure out other alternative ways to develop our comments and submit them. But I'm open to conversation.
I mean, you said exactly what I was thinking with cities like San Jose, Los Angeles, Scarsdale, New York, Boston.
I'm not feeling these are my people.
But
understand. But the point,
No offense.
the point is,
Hey, I was born in San Francisco.
We're-
Let's just get that on the table.
we are a little small fish in this pond. We're contributing 15, we would be contributing 15,000. I'm assuming that these other localities are contributing, I would hope they're contributing more, a lot more than that. And the question is, when the law firm is dealing with Los Angeles and Scarsdale, New York, and Boston, Massachusetts, they all want a letter to say A, and Marin County comes in and says, no, we want them to say B. I don't see that we're going to prevail. And really the question I was going to ask before you actually introduced the subject matter is, do we gain anything by, what do we gain by being a part of this group that we wouldn't gain by not being a part of this group?
Well, I think the only, individually, maybe not a whole bunch, but I think you look at the comments being filed, there's no doubt that it is advantageous to have a wide variety of agencies shown on the comments filed.
Sure, but they don't have to be all on the same piece of paper.
No, that's true, but I do think it's important that there be a variety of agencies from a lot of different parts of the country.
Yeah.
And of different sizes. And what I've seen down in terms of the work done by BBK is that, the focus of their comments are going to be to preserve local control. So it's not going to be so much an issue of trying to negotiate specifically zoning regulations here, zoning standards, but it will be, the approach would be that in fact this rulemaking is inappropriate, and that it is an inappropriate intrusion into local regulation, because the basic theory here in opposition to this is that the statute imposes, or I should say preserves, local zoning power, and therefore the FCC has no rulemaking authority to undermine.
So it's going to end up in a lawsuit anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to, there's no doubt it's going to end up in litigation. So, but that's the underlying issue
I'd rather
here.
contribute my $15,000 to the litigation.
Right, and I,
Yeah.
and I guess not to, we're both cutting you off because that's just kind of the way we are interrupters. But he
I'm
knows
used to
that.
it.
Yeah, exactly, the lawyer's dream. But, from the sound of it, and I think probably conceptually we'd all agree to making those kinds of basic points in our comments. And it sounds to me like a letter you could draft. I think, there's all kinds of different comments, whether it's the FTC or it's to other agencies, and some people put in, scores of pages of detailed analysis, and many other entities. We certainly filed these when I was at the Attorney General's office, put in shorter letters, but, make your points forcefully. And I guess I've got to believe that we would be able to do that.
Yes.
Probably through, you could put up that dictaphone, but and I'm sure you're going to have conversations with other entities who are preparing comments as well, and there may be opportunities for conversation and sharing of comments. And so I feel like there's got to be sort of a simpler, probably less expensive way to put together comments that get our points across. Maybe aren't the 90-page detailed letter, but I think that could probably be okay.
Let me differ with you a little there. I don't really care about the $15,000.
Well, that's because you haven't been on the board that long.
Well, but no appreciation, Ken. No. The point is, it isn't my hesitancy to go with the Washington law firm isn't so much that they're going to charge us more than Greg would charge us, and that we would be lost in a pool, an unnamed black hole of communities that we wouldn't be if Greg did it. It's that I do have, don't take this personally, I do have great confidence in Greg in understanding what our strengths, weaknesses, desires, needs, and concerns are. And if frankly, I wouldn't mind spending the money to pay his firm rather than spend the money to go down and here's $10. We're not going to be anything to the Washington except a signature line. So if they're willing to do it,
I don't know, we have to negotiate
Except
that
presumably-
next, but.
Presumably for Richard Watson to do this, it's going to be at least 15 grand, whereas for BB&K to do this, they're probably going to charge $500,000, but they're going to split it between 200 different communities.
It's a
Well,
good
that's right.
maker.
Well, the cost would depend upon the scope of the comments, because if the comment letter was simply going to be that the rulemaking exceeds the statutory authority, that's a relatively simple argument. And if the response is going to attempt to address the huge number of questions that are raised by the FCC, I wouldn't recommend that we be hired to do that, only because the cost would be very, very large to do that type of response. I don't think it's worth it for the MTA to do that type
No,
of
but they're
thing.
gonna get that from somebody else.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's really a question of, what is the scope of, well, first the question is, do you want to be involved in commenting? And then if you do, then the question becomes, what would be the scope of the letter? And then whether or not you want to be part of a larger group or not. And that's really just a judgment call there as to what's the best avenue to express a point of view.
Well, I agree with Madam Interim Chair, Queen of the Day.
Well, I think we've got
Go
some
ahead.
other commenters
I can't see
here.
that side of the table.
I have a,
No, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I have a kind of a fundamental context question. So is the legal and regulatory geography that all this is occurring in, that on one side basically you have like Commerce Clause and federal preemption, and that's the authority that the FCC would be coming in and imposing locally, that would be the source of its authority, and then the pushback would be police power authority that local agencies have. Is that kind of the tension?
It is, and again, what is the scope of the FCC's rulemaking authority and interpreting a statute within their area of regulation? And I think one problem is when you take a look at the original section of the Telecommunications Act of '96, there was broad zoning authority that was preserved to cities and counties. Unfortunately, the more recent statute, Section 6409, really became an inroad, frankly, into local zoning. And so that was a little bit of a pernicious step into an area that was being preserved for local agencies. And now it's pretty narrow because it only deals with existing facilities and their expansion, so it doesn't deal with new facilities. But it's going to be an interesting question here, where this ends up going in terms of defining the scope of the FCC's regulatory authority. One backdrop to this in some litigation, which the Supreme Court had heard recently, involved the San Antonio case, which was the timelines for acting upon applications. And it was argued in that case that the FCC did not have the authority to establish what's a reasonable period of time, which is stated in the statute, what is a reasonable period of time within which to act upon the application. And the United States Supreme Court said no, they did. So in that case, they found that that was in the scope of the FCC's interpretive authority of applying and implementing a federal regulation. So, again, it's like I said, it's where this all turns out. It's not entirely clear. I'm certain it's going to end up in litigation. Yeah. And so what we'll go through here is going to be rulemaking, and that can go on for some time. You see deadlines here that are relatively short. Our experience, this goes on much longer period of time, and the record becomes absolutely huge by the time that this is all said and done. And when the rule is finalized, then again, it looks likely we'll see a lawsuit. If it's favorable to the Telecommunications Agency, it'll be the cities and counties filing. Other way around, you possibly could see the wireless industry filing the suit.
Yeah. So I agree with the comments that the chair and Mr. Wachtella has made. But the other thing I wanted to add, bringing it more back to this agency, is that there's something that that doesn't sit quite right in terms of just looking at allocating $15,000 for this project when the media center is starving. And so I think that's just something in the big picture that really ought to be included, because if the likelihood of our getting much lobbying and rulemaking comment bang for the buck is limited, it seems a lot less attractive to me than spending that money or doing something with it to help nurture our own.
Ford took the words out of my mouth. I think it would be a feel-good exercise, but it's frankly a waste of time and money, and I'd much rather spend the $15,000 over the media center. So with all due respect to them, I mean, and I realize you guys are as cost conscious as everybody up here, but I just don't think it's a good expenditure of money, whether it's spent on Best and Creator or on Greg's firm. I've been through some rulemaking exercises and comments there too, and they do get incredibly extensive, and when you've got a lot of constituents involved, we're just one more name, we're lost in the shuffle. And to do a small letter means you're even more lost. And to climb onto BB&K Law's efforts, I think all you're doing is you're putting money in their coffers. But it's my view.
Larry?
Just, you know, I know what's in the offing with the new chairman too is consideration of retiring all the copper lines. So this is going to be huge. You know, it's not just going to be internet, it's going to be telephone, it's going to be all telecommunications. So there's no doubt it's, you know, there is a big push to go to wireless for everything. And it's been a huge issue in my community with everything from PG&E smart meters to siting the cell tower in Tamarancho. And, you know, if there is enough community feeling to want to push back against it, I don't know if going through a K Street law firm is the way to do it. You know, it may be more change.org, it may be going through some of the more broad-based community organizations and flooding them with thousands of petitions to let them know that folks are concerned about it. So, but I do agree it's an important issue and it's going to get more important. But I do
absolutely. And I think the other thing to consider, and correct me if this seems overly optimistic, to the extent that this is an ongoing rulemaking, may have other issues to it. We may have other opportunities to comment if we think it's appropriate in a more formal way. But yeah, let me open it up. Michael, would you like
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, it just got me thinking about other things. And I agree with Greg. I think this is going to result in litigation. This is a multi-pronged approach by the wireless industry, which is, you know, led by AT&T and Verizon. They've been doing this around the country. AT&T has passed some bills here in the state that are setting the stage for this. I mean, they basically want to get out of their public utility designation and those regulatory, you know, concerns, move into more of a data environment that falls under a whole different regulatory environment. And that's why, you know, they want to go wireless and pull their landlines. And you know, there are bills that are being passed around in different states that are allowing them to do that. So this is kind of the back door for that, along with the Communications Act, having a friendly sponsor like Upton, you know, kind of sets the stage for that. So I think we're going to see this attack happening, you know, on all sides, both in the courts, at the FCC, and, you know, in the House and the Senate. And I mean, it is something to prepare for. But I think getting our representatives, you know, well-read and set up with talking points and being set to go in and fight against things like this is real important. I think communities need to be able to take a stand, but it's really, you know, states and our federal houses are going to be most important.
That's a good point. So maybe we really want to focus our lobbying efforts and get those who help us with our lobbying to focus on this issue and direct it, if we do choose to spend any funding, direct it that way and be more modest.
Yeah, this has gone on for years. Remember when AT&T launched UVerse, they tried to get it designated as a data service so they wouldn't fall under cable franchising. And in fact, the COPE Act and in some of the early state bills, they tried to get outside of the right-of-way designations to put those big DSLAM boxes in. And if, you know, I know Mill Valley has them, they're the size of refrigerators. And that's for the UVerse service. And the early ones were exploding. They had batteries that were, so, you know, imagine, you know, a box like that exploding in Mill Valley in the middle of the summer and starting, I mean, these things were exploding and shooting 50 feet. So they didn't have a smooth rollout on that. But AT&T has since ceased their UVerse rollout. They hit all the market areas that they wanted. And, you know, they've stopped that rollout. So universal service is a thing of the past with a lot of these new, you know, data designations. So it's, you know, it's a new world, and if we're gonna want to have equitable services across the board in places like Marin City and the Canal. We're going to have to fight for it and be inventive.
Right. Anyone else from the public who'd like to comment on this? Barbara, did you get to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna make one additional comment on this. One of the recent laws, I established FirstNet, which is the nationwide interoperable safety network. And part of what the industry is really pushing to get the rules removed with regards to wireless expansion and siting has to do with that, or they're claiming it has to do with that, is so that as they start to build out this nationwide public safety network that's interoperable, they want to have no regulatory restraints, so they can just build out as fast as they want, and they've got the FCC's ear to, that it's local governments that's causing problems, causing delays in the implementation of broadband, the deployment of it, and that type of thing. So I just want to offer that the industry is in there with FCC and
Sure, they work
all
for the
the
banks, why not?
Exactly. So,
But they're not gonna give up.
No,
That worked
That's a
out
real
well too,
concern,
the
yes.
deregulation of the
It
banks.
did work out well.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
So
anyway, but,
sorry, go ahead.
so I was gonna say the discussion is very good.
So should we just continue this item?
So I'm thinking maybe, yes, maybe we should continue the item, but maybe we also want to set up a meeting with Jared Huffman's office to get him up to speed right away on these issues. So I would suggest that we give that direction, figure out who are the appropriate people to have that meeting. I think you're going to want a board member of some sort, but obviously staff that are better versed in the legal issues than most of us are. So I think if we could get that set up soon, that would be great, because this is obviously coming early in the new year. But then I think we maybe just defer the issue and see if it comes back for future opportunities, reconsider
Sure.
what, if any, action we want to take then.
Sure.
Is that
Sounds
everyone
good.
comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one other
Yeah.
thing is if as I talk to the other organizations, other cities and stuff, that there is a sample of
Yeah.
something that we can file
Right.
without
Thank
investment,
you.
investment.
Yeah.
Just
I think
change the names of the cities.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. If you do see some kind of a sample letter that really is, would be the kinds of comments that would be appropriate for us to make, I think that would be great. The deadline is coming up soon and before our next board meeting. I'm wondering if we want to have a finance and policy meeting in January, so those of us on that committee would have an opportunity to look at the comments, or we want to create an ad hoc committee of 2 people that could look at the comments. I just feel that some number of folks on the board, I'd be more comfortable if we looked at the comments before they went out, just so we're informed.
Exactly.
So,
I'd volunteer for that one.
for an ad hoc,
Yeah.
yeah, I
or-
think that might be helpful.
Or just
Yeah.
circulate it to finance and policy.
Yeah.
The only thing is, if
If
the
it
full
constitutes a
committee
notice
has to
meeting.
do, you have to notice the meeting of that
Exactly,
committee.
that's what I'm thinking, a little ad hoc of.
You would have to, to review and comment upon it,
Yeah.
decide whether or not to send that letter. So
Right.
you'd be better off, I think, to do an ad hoc committee,
I
frankly.
think so too.
To
So
take a
we
look at
got
it.
one person on the ad hoc. Any other volunteers for the letter?
I would, but I probably won't be back.
Well, heck with you then.
I know.
Promises, promises.
Any other teachers volunteers?
Fine.
Geez, you go down fast there, buddy.
I was gonna go forward on vacation, but I guess
I'll be back. Whenever they jump up at one time.
Yeah.
Wish I would.
Sorry to leave you out of that volunteer opportunity, Rupert.
I'm sorry, did you wish to stay in?
I give Andrew a hard enough time in the past, so I'll let him go first.
All right, I
Great.
think so. You got what you need on this item.
Yes, I do.
All righty, then I think we are adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays.
Good job.